Labor is today claiming a victory of sorts in the cost of living crisis, when in reality, its phony economic management and spin have been exposed. Instead of lowering the cost of electricity by $275, as they promised they would, and improving the lives of struggling Australians, as they promised they would, they pumped taxpayer-funded money into subsidies and then claimed it was an inflation win. But that giveaway con job has come undone today, and I'll show you why shortly. According to today's inflation data, the underlying inflation rate, the trimmed mean, came in at 3.2%, down from 3.5% in October. That is not in the Reserve Bank's range. It needs to be between 2 and 3%. So we are still above the RBA's target. We're not there yet. Yet the Treasurer was all smiles.
These new numbers are an important reminder of the very substantial and very sustained progress that we have made in the fight against inflation.
Well, here's the thing. There hasn't been any progress because headline inflation rose from 2.1% to 2.3% in the 12 months to November. It's above the 2.2% rise expected by economists. It has gone up. Now, this is important in understanding why interest rates remain high and exposes Albanese and Chalmers for spending our money on quick band-aid solutions that still don't solve the problem. Because in the last few months, the figures have been temporarily and falsely altered by Labor's electricity subsidies, both state and federally. It means you and I are helping to pay for each other's electricity bills. So how is bringing down inflation actually bringing down inflation when we are sent the bill? It was all designed to trick the Reserve Bank into thinking that Labor has got a handle on the economy, but it was always going to be the case. Once those rebates started petering out, you and I as consumers were going to reap the costs. And boom, the con job has been exposed today. It's happening already because electricity prices soared 22.4% in the month of November. And CommSec says it's because the impact of government bill rebates was lower than in October. Have a look at that figure. Have a look at that graph. It has soared dramatically. And this was always going to happen because Labor told us it would bring down power bills by $275, then stood there in the May budget with the promise of subsidised energy relief. It was always going to be temporary. Headline inflation had been receding in recent months as households were showered with those rebates. However, RBA Governor Michelle Bullock has repeatedly stressed the RBA will look through the decline given the costs of living supports will expire at the end of June. And those supports certainly have not stopped costs from soaring. Food and drink has risen by 2.9%. Alcohol and tobacco surged 6.7%. And the cost of recreation is costing 3.2% more.
And all of this tells us that the government's been playing games. It's seeking to hide inflation, but we know underlying inflation is not where it needs to be. Now, you don't need to tell any Australians that. They know it. They see it in the bank account. They see it when they go to the checkout. They see it when they have to pay their bills. They are suffering.
And interest rates should be going down as they are in other Western countries. So what do today's figures mean now for the RBA? I'll let economist Warren Hogan explain.
It's maybe telling us that inflation is running around 3, maybe 3.5. And it isn't a good surprise. It's not making, it won't make the RBA any happier about the trajectory for inflation. So I don't think this really changes the story much at this stage.
Yeah, it doesn't change much. And most economists do not expect the RBA to begin its easing cycle until its May 1920 board meeting, which, if realised, would dash Labor's chance of pre-election rate relief. And of course, that spells trouble.
Will you take responsibility if there's no interest rate cut before the election?
The Reserve Bank is responsible for interest rates.
But your policies impact what the Reserve
Bank is responsible for interest rates.
And let's remind ourselves of those policies and Labor's performance when it comes to the economy and inflation. First, they promised us everything and more.
A plan to address cost of living, take pressure off cost of living, pressure off the cost of living, cost of living relief, downward pressure on cost of living.
And more empty promises.
In our first term, we've brought down the cost of childcare for over 1 million families.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
We've delivered real wage increases 4 quarters in a row.
In our next term, we will cut 20% of the student debt of every single Australian who has one.
Delivering tax cuts for every Australian.
And of course, they promised to help mortgage holders. But too bad if you own a home, because rates have gone up 12 times. And when the going got tough, Jim Chalmers blamed the RBA for smashing households with higher interest rates during a cost of living crisis. All the while, record government spending fueled inflation. The only time federal government spending has been this large was in the early stages of the COVID pandemic. Big Australia got bigger. A record 1.15 million migrants have come to this country since Labor came to office. Population growth is masking a per capita recession fuelled by record migration numbers. All, of course, at the expense of families, all at the expense of household budgets, and all the while, interest rates remain high. And once again, we are all poorer for it.